Yeah, maybe it's just the way Warma could see it is that it's more of an anti-aggro spell mage list. You know what I mean? Because it still does most of the stuff spell mage does, but it does have those tools that are good at, you know, sweeping boards, like you said, especially if you're expecting rogue, paladin, for example. So maybe that's the way, but yeah, it is interesting that druid is going to be the ban.
Is that true, right? Like, is that a statement that we can actually make, right? Like, if you take spell mage and then take out all the cards that say if your deck has no minions in them, can you really say that your deck is doing all the things that spell mage does? Because you've taken all the powerful spell mage things out of the deck.
Most of the things spell mage does. Anyway, moving quickly on as the game has begun. Of course, Warma, of course, the actual, you know, however much we might question the deck and how powerful it is, he is 2-0'd out of his group, right? So he is the group winner here, going into this top 8 with this ping mage on the top. And Felkeine there, we didn't really touch on the priest. It seems fairly standard looking at it. And again, because it's the one thing I like to comment on about these priest builds is it is just a Ysera at the top here for Falcon.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we've seen just Yogg, we've seen Malagos and Cthulhu, we've seen Malagos and Ysera. It is just mono Ysera here at the top end, otherwise topping out at 4 with the Zyrella and the Blademaster.
I love that. I wonder if Falcon's thought pattern there was, oh, there's the nod to the Incanter's flow, but most importantly, it's like, check notes. Warma, yeah, ping mage looks, he pinged on turn 2. Okay, yeah, makes sense. Does of course make this refreshing spring water less consistent. Is one of the things you were talking about. Is how is it as powerful as spell mage more or less? Well, no, it can whiff to an extent, but also the card draw's probably just good enough with just enough upside to keep it in the deck, I think.
Damn it! Immediately tilted. Raven can testify. Actually, no. Were you there while I was playing this?
I was there for half of it. I was there for half of it.
All right. Well, I'll need Derek or Gia to testify that I played Refreshing Spring Water and 0 times refreshed 4 mana crystals while playing this deck.
And me mentioning he can ping this turn might sound silly, like I'm purely joking, and I'm not. Purely because Warma is playing the Modresh Fire Eye, that if he pings 10 times, he can... Oh, sorry, apologies. If he deals 10 damage... Sorry, with his hero power, not 10 times, because he has buffs to that, and of course his minion, then it just deals 10 to everything, the board and his opponent. So it's a pretty big deal there, just to try and set up for that a little bit of a late game for some either burst or insane board clear potential.
Yes, and that is a very important distinction, because if you play Wildfire, and then, for example, your opponent has 5 minions, you're playing against an aggro deck, they get a fast start, and you just play the apprentice on turn 4 and it hits their 5 minions, you're done. Like, that's it. You're juiced. At that point, you are ready to go.
Quest complete.
Yeah, so it's a lot easier to achieve than you might think it is. It's just whether the payoff in itself is just even worth having the cards in the deck in the first place, I suppose, is the argument. Like, you do tend to get it done.
Yeah, I think the bigger question is with... I'm not going to say limited card draw, but with limited how it feels compared to Spell Mage, it's whether you even hit Modresh in a game, right, as well. Because you can't tutor it, so you do have to get to it. Although I guess he is running Tailin, so that's just a lie. I've just lied to you. Got to get to Tailin.
There was, 6 damage just that turn coming out from Hero Powers. Ping face, ping the minion again.
I think he's close to done now, right? Or at least because he pinged turn 2, he pinged turn 3 or 4.
He's on 7 or 8, yeah, if I had to guess.
In the meantime, though, Felkeine's done a great job. That palm reading really paying off and just reducing so much of his hand down. Means he can pop off with his Sethic. And he was already aware, of course, that this secret is not counterspell. Already tested.
Yeah, it was a good choice. It was a long time ago now, but taking the palm reading from the Discover, I believe, which not only gave him the discount, but it also double corrupted the insights that he had in his hand, which I think was a fantastic choice at the time. I think it was easy to look at that hand and say, well, maybe I'm like coining the 4/9 next turn, so I don't need to worry about corrupting my Sethics, but I think Felkeine did not get baited there and just took the right line, and he's being rewarded for it right now.
And I also like this choice here. I think in a lot of matchups you would just like pop off with these renews or whatever on this Ethic. But in this matchup, all Felkeine needs to do is heal through all the damage, right? And it's unlikely in this deck that you're going to receive silly damage, right? It's more just like it's probably going to be 2 turns worth of high burst damage, in which if he holds enough heal, then he can just maybe dodge lethal there and win the game.
Gets offered a Pexis Blast, which is not a good card because of the way his deck is built. There's a second Wildfire, though, nice and early. This is what you've got to account for, right? When you say that, you know, the damage, you can out-heal the damage. You do have a better Hunter hero power in this deck now. Like, the damage does keep on going. And, like, you are down to a Pexis Blast in the deck that aren't there, but you replace that with 10 damage from your 10-drop minion that can come out and kind of replace that damage as well. So there is a surprising quantity of damage.
Yeah, I think, I guess more of my point was the, say, 2 turns worth of burst, because, for example, the Modresh is 10 damage, but it's also a whole turn, most of the time, obviously based on reductions. So it's just like, as long as Felkeine can, you know, pump some healing after 1 clear burst turn, then he'll be at least safe from being 2 turned, right? Obviously, he still has to contend with these pings all the time, but at least he's not just going to get burst down. In before all the order rules in the chat. Conic Studies. Probably going to be Mage Scribe, I imagine. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And Felkeine also nice, talking of healing, just getting these heals in while he can, just to try and, you know, negate some of these pings, at least to an extent right now. Reckless Apprentice, though. Oh, nice, isn't it?
It really is. You can see the 10 cards remaining there for Warma. I'm just looking again at that refreshing spring water potential, but he rips the Arcane Intellect there instead. Pushes his way through, picks up the cards, drops the Reckless Apprentice, which is not only a board clear, but actually represents a significant amount of damage being pushed that turn, with 2 pings ending up going to the face.
And that's it, right? The fact it doesn't actually use up your hero power means that you do, you know, a lot get those double ping turns, and it's pretty scary.
In case you are not familiar with where this deck is leading, this is the end game. Mordresh Fire Eye, which is absolutely juiced at this point. You need to deal 10 total damage with your hero power. It is still remaining in Warma's deck, which clears not only all minions for 10 damage, but also hits face for 10 as well.
It clears the face for 10 damage.
Absolutely.
I think it's a really tricky game for Falcon to navigate here, because he definitely has to always think about how much he can potentially heal or take any given turn. Whereas I think, like, versus normal spell mage, then you're generally more worried about clearing the minions they make, right? Because they can make some pretty crazy, scary minions.
My powers are never
Yep, there's
Spell
Egwin.
damage effect ping. Let me check. No, okay.
But it does affect having minions in your deck. As I mentioned, that's one of the buffs this deck does have. This is not the deck that we were talking about when we were talking about how much better Egwin is when you're actually playing a minion-based deck. But he does have at least that small upside to his version of the deck, that he can get that additional spell damage cycling through his deck.
And Felkaine's just feeling it now, right, as well. He knows this is very quickly setting up to, wow, any turn I might be dead at this point, because there's enough board presence, there's spell damage, Warma has drawn most of his deck, there's pings for 3 every single turn. Like, this is starting to get really dicey right now. And weirdly enough, I think Warma could take the approach of just keep, like, pinging and keep just trying to push the odd minion damage and make Felkeine use heals.
It's
as
so
opposed
good,
to just
right? Like,
as opposed to just trying to go, okay, go, and hope the heals aren't there, right? You can just keep pinging.
like we talk about how well Hunter can get there just by weaving in those hero powers, right? For 2 damage face. Imagine if that hero power did 3 damage to face, and you also had played so much card draw in your deck that you were down to 7 cards remaining in your deck on turn 9. Like, how is anyone supposed to survive that?
I don't think I'll survive it if this deck becomes a better face hunter, okay? So also, I don't want to continue this conversation.
Fair enough.
Felkeine doing his best there to heal up. He does silence the Aegwin, but obviously that means he can't clear it. So although he silenced the spell damage, he's just taking 5 this turn, which has got to feel bad. It's even just like Flame Strike ping the 5/8 and it's just dead.
Yeah, that means you don't ping face this turn though, Raven.
Yeah. Maybe trade like devolving missiles is just more than good enough here.
Looks like he is going to take the ping.
He's still getting to push 5, right?
Yeah, he still gets to push 5, and he also holds back that devolving, say, an Apotheosis minion lands, right? That's too big to just straight up kill with damage. He doesn't want to be throwing damage at it. He doesn't want to be trading minions into it either. So I think he's earmarking that devolving missiles potentially for solving that exact scenario.
You don't pick the one, see?
Okay. Focused Will again is pretty huge to be able to deny the Prime here.
Feels weird, right? Because it's like it denies the Prime, but it keeps the minion on board to hit. So I do like Hysteria being used to an extent here as well, but it does mean that if this hits into the 3-2, which it will, of course, then the Prime is in play. Oh, was that Prime?
There he is. No, it's more Mordresh off the
Prime.
top.
I was like, wow. Well,
It's the lad. Boom. Take 10. Oh, Alex Straza is huge.
yeah, Felkeine does have that Shadow Word Death, so that the actual 10-10 body of Mordresh is unimportant.
Yep.
I was actually a little bit surprised Warma went for Mordresh there. I know it's easy to say because we can see a Shadow Word Death, but I thought like just tail and ping, then he'll get the Prime, and then go again, you know, and that sort of thing. Maybe felt a bit stronger overall, but again, maybe I'm just being blinded by the fact that I can just see Shadow Word Death.
Yeah. I think, again, if we look at the remaining cards he has in his deck, I think just focusing on dealing damage on most turns is a pretty sensible thing for him to do, right? Because, like, sure, he can draw Prime. He could also just draw Mask of Cthulhu or a second Fireball, right? And then at that point, just throwing damage at his opponent's face every turn is something that seems like it would have paid off enormously. Face. No, okay. So that was a 1-drop? No, he's already flowed once, right? So
yes, sorry,
yeah, so he now has a 9-mana spell, a 6-mana spell, a 4-mana spell, and a 3-mana spell in his deck, and a Jandis Barov. Fascinating.
So what are the key ones? Like Libram of Hope could be very nice here for a Divine Shield.
Yeah, Libram of Hope is a very, very big deal. Unfortunately, that Fireball that was in his deck is now most likely just card draw, which he absolutely does not want at this point, because there's only 5 cards left remaining in his deck.
Also, the Secret's rigged fair game, and I'm pretty sure Falcaine's not going to deal any damage to face now, so...
Right.
Warma's just maybe getting into a bit of a dicey spot here.
The cycle of life is
Having to use the Alex for removal as opposed to healing, which means he is now vulnerable to some of this burn damage, but only the Fireball remains at this point, and we'll get to see a large amount of what has been generated into this deck. Sprint is not it. It's exactly what I was talking about.
Okay, he burnt the Scrap Shot, much rather have burnt Sprint, but the other card draw was pretty good.
Yep. That Sprint was a Fireball, and he would have much rather had a Fireball this turn.
And he does also have that that evocation, right? So if he can get rid of as much of his hand as possible, or even half of his hand, right, he can potentially still evocate for some kind of lethal plan.
Okay, just like, okay, all right, I'll take a 6/6. That's fine.
Yeah, only -2/2 there. Not
Yeah.
terrible.
He does have a bit of an issue with Warma, though, in terms of clearing his hand for the evocation, because 3 of the cards in his hand are Sprint, Cram Session, which obviously he absolutely does not want to play at this point.
I guess the positive bit is he might not need a handful of cards, right? He just needs a couple of burn cards to be available for him.
Yeah. Is a clear available here for the 8/8 because Felkeine was able to hold on to a reasonably sized minion with the 6/6. Does involve a lot of resources to clear it up, though. Either one Condemn and Zyrella or both Condemns. I like this option just purely because it puts more damage in play. Obviously, Felkeine knows which cards were remaining naturally in Warma's deck, but he doesn't know which of them were in Warma's hand before the Deck of Lunacy was cast.
Right.
And so one of the things he can account for is the Mask of Cthulhu, for example, which we know is that Libram of Hope. Actually, I think he can work that out, right? There's no other possible card that Libram of Hope could have been. That has to be the mask.
Yeah, the one mask.
He knows there is no longer a Mask of Cthulhu.
Because he'd already seen Flame Strike, right? So
Yes,
those are the only 2 7-drops.
Yep.
This can be tricky stuff in the moment to keep track of, because it's not as if Deck Tracker does it for you, right? So it is just, a couple of tough things that can keep track of if you're feeling under the pressure here. So although Felkeine does have access to that information, it's whether that's actually registered is always a fear. But Warma's on burn now. He is fatiguing, or beginning to fatigue. So Felkeine now just sees the light at the end of the tunnel and just has to get there.
No apotheosis. I think that's what Felkeine was probably looking for in this spot, just to really hammer this game home.
He got still palm reading. Still gets to condemn at least once.
Yeah, he just needs the one condemn. It's a guaranteed full clear. Okay, there it is. I do think Falcon should have been doing this a couple of turns ago, right? Like the turn where I was breaking down what numbers he could have it in his deck, I think Falcon should have been doing the same thing, because he did look a little salty when the Libram came out, and really the only thing there that could have been a surprise to him was that the mask was in the deck and not in the hand when the Lunacy went off.
Right.
Otherwise, there's a Libram of Hope in there somewhere, and Warma had one card left in his deck, right? So it wasn't particularly unlucky that he had a Libram of Hope in his hand at that point.
Real questions about this Raised Dead. He could, do nicely from this Raised Dead, I think.
Yeah.
It looks like he's going to just ultimately value his life. And you see Felkeine there, he has no clue what's in hand for Warma at this point. He has got no clue.
I was about to ask, was it ever worth, maybe one cram session there just to open up one more space in your hand, even though it accelerates your fatigue so heavily?
Hey, Gwyn. Mini Mage.
Right?
No, I got Mini Mage.
Oh, because I guess Mini Mage is, 2-mana Spy Mistress in this point. It's actually just a pretty good aggro minion just to guarantee stick to the board.
Also, he's got Font of Power as well, which at this point, resources is not bad. He can Font of Power and Netherwind here.
Mm-hmm.
Oh! Synergy.
He didn't weave in the ping! What's happening, Raven? Oh my goodness.
Oh no, he's saving that ping for next turn with the ping buff minion.
Yep.
It's the only play. Oh, I'm shocked. I would have 100% Deathwing that.
My blade seeks vengeance.
I feel like any turn that passes with this dynamic of Warma not pinging but Felkeine healing his own face is just kind of counterintuitive to Warma's game plan right now.
Made up for it though with Fallen Hero.
true.
Power for the taking.
And Warma keeping things simple because that's what they are right now. Chuck everything on the board, ping,
Yep.
and go. And another question, should he ping and trade into
Where does
the
ping
taunt
go?
now?
Yeah.
Does he have to ping the 8-4? Because it's an 8-4. And he could just ping it away? Okay, that's simple. This is funny for many reasons.
Nice hand, idiot. Yep. It was at that moment.
And Raised Dead is actually pretty good for Warma, honestly. It's just more stuff to play.
It is, yeah. This is huge, though. This is a play, like Monsanto was tweeting about this play. He kind of threw a game horribly because he miscalculated, but the point he was in actually made things look pretty strong for him because he gets to kill the Talon on board and draw his own power card in Priest into his hand that can't really be played by the opponent. But because the hand was so bad, what Felkeine received, he just didn't really have the ability to do anything. Oh my god! That's just lethal! That's just lethal, Raven!
Gee, Felkaine's laughing here, but that is the best, worst Illucia I have ever seen, and it is just funny.
Warma, kill him already, please! Put him out of his misery, okay. Jeez.
Imagine thinking your opponent had good cards in their hand. Absolutely insane ending to game number 1 there, Felkeine handing it over to Warma. And you know, I understand the play, right? He just didn't want to raise dead. As you mentioned, he could have forced a Ysera draw, which whatever Warma does normally, the Ysera draw is good for Felkeine because either he plays Ysera and then you get all the cards, or he doesn't and you can play Ysera potentially. So yeah, I completely understand the play there from Felkeine. Of course, it was just the outcome was very funny to me. That's all.
Yeah, the thing is, right, you kind of have a lot of known variables in what's going on there, because if you've been keeping track to some extent, you can kind of reverse engineer by the mana cost of the lunacy cards that he played, plus the natural cards that he's played, like what the 3 remaining cards are, or at least what they were originally, right?
Yes.
Which is 2 cram sessions and a fireball, right? Just because there's nothing else of the mana cost of those that were played that would be those cards. You don't know which 2 of those cards are naturally those cards and which one of them isn't, right? So if it's the fireball that's remaining as Felkeine, you're terrified and you want to Illucia there and fireball your opponent because that's your way to win the game. Because it wasn't any of those cards, actually what he ended up doing by Illuciating and then like killing the Star Scryer and drawing a spell and so on and so forth and giving his opponent the Raise Dead was actually potentially handing lethal over to his opponent. So there was kind of enough variables known there to sort of put a plan together, but not enough known to be 100% definitive. Right. So Felkeine kind of had to take a punt either way, and the punt that he took backfired spectacularly with the Reckless Apprentice coming out from the Raise Dead for Warma.
And like I said, in defense of what looks pretty bad from Felkeine, which it isn't, like you've just quite rightly pointed out, it does make sense. When Lunacy comes into play and there's reductions out of nowhere, then it becomes incredibly hard to keep track of all of that, right? There is nothing really doing that job for you, unlike, obviously it's like, have they played a fireball? Well, Deck Tracker covers that, right? But when things like that happen, it is almost impossible, especially under pressure, to actually mentally juggle and keep track of all of that to be good enough to say, oh, he should have known this was the right play or whatever. And it's like, so it was very difficult. The choice made sense. Like I said, it was just pretty nutty how it actually turned out that Warma had the worst hand to actually give over to Felkeine there. So kind of just funny. But it does mean we are moving on to our game number 2. Warma with this secret Libram Paladin with a couple of different additions there, as I feel like we expect from Warma, with the Goody 2 shields in there. He's choosing to go for Kazakus, but overall, again, pretty close to a standard list for me.
Yeah, McGurgle thrown in there as well. I think it's the Murloc and the Goody Two Shields coming in for 2 Penflingers, really, outside of a what would be a standard list if you want to incorrectly play Kazakus from the previous week, right? And Murga's kind of interesting because it kind of has synergy or anti-synergy, depending on which way you want to look at it, with Talon. Because when you play the, once you get the Prime shuffled in your deck, that is then in a lot of scenarios your highest cost minion is the one that's going to end up getting drawn. So that means sometimes you're not going to get your Liadrin in positions where you want to guarantee getting your Liadrin, but in some positions you're going to get your Prime in positions where you really want to guarantee getting your Prime. So it can certainly work in both directions. It's certainly a tricky one to decide whether you want
yeah,
to do it or not.
And I think if you're going to, lose out on getting your Liadrin, drawing a board in a box is actually not the worst thing you could get instead, right? So Felkeine here going to be on his OTK Demon Hunter, and this is again like just a very interesting matchup, but one I think might end up just favouring Felkeine. He's running those double Sigil of Flames, and just because of the nature of how Paladin has gone now with this sort of secret Libram package, I think there's just enough things that the Demon Hunter can kind of throw away into the secrets to still be fine, right? Like Chaos Strikes can, be thrown away. Even to an extent, studies as well and a few other tools can be just sacrificed to Yogg, so that you can guarantee the Felscreen Blast and the skulls and anything else that are needed. So I do, for me at least, think that this list, especially from Felkeine, feels quite strong versus Paladin.
It does, yeah, for sure. We certainly saw Sigil of Flame really come back and bite him in the previous series, where it was Nerubian Egg. It was Nerubian Egg coming down on curve, right, to really punish him.
Yes.
4-4 in play, Avenge started going off. He just took way too much damage way too early, but that's not going to happen against most people's lists. There really aren't too many punishing death rattles that can be dropped preemptively, because it's very similar to a Doomsayer effect, right, where a lot of times, like previously when we used to see like Frostnova Doomsayer, and you just play your death rattle minion just to be able to preserve some semblance of board.
You just cube something.
You just cube something. Yeah, exactly. That was the nuts. The cube meta, of course. How can we all forget? But that's just not really the case anymore, though, especially if it comes down in the early game. There's no Haunted Creeper. People aren't really playing that much Egg, even though Felkeine already ran into it. So it should be fairly effective, at least if he gets it in the early game. The worry is if he starts getting them in his hand in the mid-game against Paladin, in which case, the 4/6s and the big, the multiple Librams coming down on individual minions on each turn, that's when it starts to interact particularly poorly. But if it does come down as an early game tool, I would expect it to be quite powerful in this matchup.
Yeah, looking at the opening hands here, a little bit frustrating, I guess, for Felkeine to have a Moag there in that left spot. But again, in this deck, you can, throw away a Moag, I'll say, and still be okay, depending on the way the rest of your card draw is going, as long as you can get those philosophies on the go.
Yeah, I actually think it's a fairly, low tier card in terms of frustration levels. That's very confusing. In terms of minions,
low tier frustration.
Yeah, exactly. in terms of cards that I don't want on the left hand side of my hand, Moag isn't very high on that list, is what I'm saying. Because generally, especially against an aggro deck, one Moag just to go Moag Immolation, Moag Fellscream, Moag Eye-Beam, whatever it is, you're probably going to have to do that at some point in the game anyway, just to stabilize. So the fact that that's on the left of your hand is not really that big a deal in most circumstances, as opposed to Il'gynoth being on the far left.
Yes, of course. And a nice little bonus there from first day at school for Warma. Just having that possessed villager means that there's something of death rattle on the board, right? It's not the best, but it's something that can stick buffs, help with Avenge mainly as well. So it is something. Is Glide just going to win this game, or are we not cool enough to hang with APAC? Okay, there we go.
Yeah, so far in APAC, we have seen one utterly trash Glide that won the game, and one extremely good Glide, which I believe also won the game. So apparently Glide is just the card.
APAC, the best of Glides and the worst of Glides. Is the way they should definitely start tomorrow's broadcast. We are just having one of our players with a slight connection issue, as you can probably tell, because I'm guessing you can read. But we will be getting back shortly, of course. There you go. So nothing lost for the players, except a couple of seconds. Felkeine thinking, which one to trade into? The one I like the best.
Mm-hmm. Awkward hand, Libram with no discount, Northwatch with no secret, player with no connection, Wi-Fi failing, left, right, and center. It's all going Pete Tong.
Yeah, the good thing here is it's one of the, I guess, added benefits of McGurgle. It makes it much more likely for Avenge to happen because any Divine Shield minion, right, is stickier on board. So then it's probably going to be able to receive an Avenge buff.
This definitely seems like the efficient way to play it out. This gives him Avenge into Northwatch Commander on the following turn, or just straight up Kazakus on the following turn if he wants to try and go, stick a board into 5-mana Golem to represent a lot of pressure, play that curve instead. It does seem like it's currently Warma that's having some connectivity issues, and this does seem to be a persistent problem with him as we progress through GM. So I certainly feel his frustration as he's trying to play this game through intermittent connection issues.
Yeah, it's funny, isn't it? It won't dwell on it too much, but when one player has a connection issue, I think everyone generally is like, oh, it's unfortunate for the other player. It's like, have you tried to play games with connection issues? It's way worse for the person having them, trust me.
Yeah.
Now, there is options, as you mentioned, whether it's the Avenge Commander or just trying to get Kazakus down. Because he could use the turn to play Kazakus. He knows it will get cleaned up completely, but it would then give him a fairly clean board for the Golems if he goes for a 5.
Yeah, I do personally think it's less attractive now because he knows that his board isn't going to stick, right? I think if he could threaten the 5-mana buff Golem on a board that looked somewhat like this going into the following turn, then that'd be very, very appealing. You really force Felkeine to clear up with the threat of the Golem, but I think also, because he can't do that, he's going to go with the secret play instead. This makes sense.
And also Avenge will proc, right? Because this actually happens on Felkaine's turn, even though, might not be 100% sure of that, as Sigils aren't the most played thing in the meta right now.
Kaboom. 6-3.
Felkeine really needs this Chaos Strike to do some work, unless this draw off the top is nice. Yeah. Definitely not the best. He does get to use his mana this turn, but he... Shock horror, I'm going to say it. He really needs to get to that skull pretty quick.
Yeah. Who knew, right?
I'm looking for a few good mercenaries.
One drop. Does have that Aldor Attendant to pair with his Kazakus this turn for no doubt a 5-cost Golem next turn from Warma.
Yeah, I think this does end up being a 5.
Does also have the choice of equipping Weapon next turn actually as well.
I cannot wait to read.
That is true, yeah. Lifesteal very rarely relevant, right? Like,
oh yeah.
24 is the one breakpoint I think you're supposed to be a little bit scared of against OTK Demon Hunter, right? Like if they can go face enough with their weapons to push you below 24, maybe think about healing then, because that's a very easy breakpoint for them to hit with Fellscream hitting for 8 3 times. That's a very easy thing for them to achieve. But the difference between like 1 health and 24 health is almost nothing when you're playing against OTK Demon Hunter. So making sure you have a big lifesteal weapon is very rarely relevant.
Yeah, I was actually very interested to see how Warma responded to this turn because he knows the Sigil's live. And I was wondering whether because the Sigil was live, he's like, okay, Libram of Judgment, swing face, I'll build a board next turn. But no, he wants at least something to stick around. And he can give him some time for his Libram of Judgment to just cook a little bit more in the hand.
Yeah, and I kind of respect that as well, purely because he's now seeing second Eldraki Warblades on the other side, right? If he didn't see the second Blades come down, he might feel like, well, okay, maybe just 15 damage on a stick gets there this game. But he knows he needs a board to stick, right? He's got 15 damage from hand, his opponent's at 20. He would have been even higher if he didn't have minions to trade into this turn. Like, where is the rest of that damage coming from, if not from minions and building a board?
The one thing Warma must be very happy about is the size of Felkaine's hand right now. Because this is what you want to see when you're against Demon Hunter. If they don't have anywhere near a full hand, you are feeling very confident until they draw the skull.
Door of the Fallen is more functional card draw here. It also pushes more damage.
Also threatens Yogg, right?
Mm-hmm.
Oh! Okay.
Oh, no! He's going to have to
Fell Scream
consume a
test,
Fell
yep.
Scream into the Yogg. This is a big deal. That is the premium finisher card in the deck now that's gone down.
And he's already used
Holy
an
Smite there,
I-beam,
which
right?
is very nice. Let's see. He has... No, he still has 2 I-beams remaining in his deck, it seems. He might have discovered one and used it, maybe, but it appears he still has 2 remaining in his deck.
Okay. I'll take your word for it.
Having said that, I've just noticed that our deck tracker is reporting that there's still like 20-something cards left.
That's why I didn't want to say that.
Yeah. So you might be right on that one.
I mean, Libram of Hope here for Warma puts him up to 30, which again isn't normally the biggest of deals, gaining that 2 extra health. But more importantly, it puts an 8/8 Divine Shield on the board, and now there's the backup of the corrupted Libram of Judgment, which not only pushes damage, but will keep Warma topped up.
Mm-hmm. Likely to be fairly inconsequential with all of the Warblades already been consumed. Getting a pounce there off the On My Yogg.
Mm-hmm. At least it wasn't a negative, right? I guess that's the view to take.
Sure.
Alas, poor Warlock.
Galloping Savior will now get activated.
2 Philosophies with the 0 cost in hand means he can afford to play 1 in Immolation or maybe next turn.
Yes.
Or just go nuts, of course, with 4. It's
Yes.
not something you normally see, but it's something that you could see here.
Exactly. Oh!
1 off?
That's
no,
he's
it's
got
lethal.
it,
Sorry,
right?
yeah, I
Libram weapon,
did not see the Libram in the hand. Yeah, that's just going to be game. And Felkeine, again, like I mentioned earlier, just really suffered from just not getting that card draw going. Wait.
Oh no, does he have... Okay. I now understand perhaps the pause before the lethal in the previous game as well, if he's having internet issues.
Right.
Making sure that he has a perfectly stable, lag-free internet connection before doing any action on those all-important lethal turns.
Yeah, if the game stutters and you've clicked the wrong card, you've lost. Right? And so, yeah, I completely get it, yeah. But a good game there from Warma. And again, it's just, that's one of those Demon Hunter games. As the opponent, you really want low card draw. That's number 1 priority. If they aren't cycling through their deck, you have a much larger window to win the game. And we saw that in that one there.
Yeah, I think it was, Double Skull bottom 10, Acrobatics bottom 5, Il'gynoth bottom 5. Like, that's going to be a hard game to win for sure, just purely on the order your cards are in.
Yeah, and
Felkeine did his best. Honestly, he survived for a very, very long time against a pretty consistent onslaught from Warma without really consuming any resources, right? Like, he was stocked up. Like, he was quad Moarg Talented Arcanist still in his hand at that point. Like, he was still a couple of draws away from deleting his opponent for 72 damage that game, Like, he still had everything stocked up and ready to go. But in the end, it just needed 1 more point of health and maybe he would have had a chance.
And although you can say it's a bad thing because, well, he had these cards in hand, which meant he didn't have Skull as 2 of the cards, but those Sigils of Flame, I think, did a good job. They even if they didn't necessarily clear the board, because Warma did some plays to, get something, it made Warma not just jam Golem and then jam this, right? And just completely curve on the board the way he would have wanted to. So the Sigils of Flame there being nice defensive tools, but it does mean now Warma is going to be sitting on this control Warlock to potentially, for him, finish out the series in a very quick fashion here.
Potentially, yes, but I do
Probably
think that...
no.
Right. It depends, right, how Felkaine's feeling, because Felkeine does have an extremely low-value Control Priest on his side of things, which is going to be in trouble against Control Warlock. That is an absolutely miserable matchup under all circumstances. But I do also think that OTK Demon Hunter, for example, does very, very well in this matchup. So it depends whether Felkeine wants to get good results under his belt and try and climb back into the series, or whether he just wants to, put it on the line right now and say, I need to win with Priest, so I'm just going to queue it up right now. That's basically what's going to control whether Warma gets out of this with a decisive 3-0 or not.
Well, I can tell you right now, it's going to be Demon Hunter once again from Felkeine there. So he's going to queue the Demon Hunter and maybe have a bit of a better go of it and just get to some of that card draw, which is what the deck's all about. It's the reason you normally see just like draw a card, pass, draw 2 cards, pass, as many of the Demon Hunter turns, because they just want to get to that combo and get to those mana reductions from that skull you can see in the far right of Felkeine's hand.
All those cards in the bin, find things that are dumpable from that left-hand side.
I'm just waiting for the Il'gynoth far left.
The Il'gynoth far left, it can happen, yeah. There's an argument, like, I've definitely, like, heard players discussing this, of, like Philosophy's not the worst card to dump, and the 4-drop isn't the worst card to dump, so maybe you just keep those 2 cards, because they're actually playable to the left-hand side of your skull, and then you get to skull on 5.
Yeah, part of me really, really wanted to ask you if you just throw the skull because it's on the far right, and then I thought you'd shout at me, so I didn't.
But you see, there was an interesting question to be asked in there, right?
Oh, the one time!
You just
one
didn't
time I
find
restrained
it,
myself.
and I had to ask myself.
Well, already those are arguably dumpable cards, especially against Warlock, because you might not need enough, you know, like the max damage, because Warlock's naturally probably not going to be on 30 health, right?
Right.
The Warma not really messing about. Not the best choices. Although, was Shadow Council one of his choices?
Shadow Council was
I think he should have just gone, right? Just pop off.
Easy acrobatics. Kind of strictly worse than Spectral Sight in that position, but there are upsides and downsides to both cards. I talked before about how, like, you're very unlikely to draw 2 cards that you want to play immediately with Demon Hunter, but to be fair to the card, I didn't, like, give its upside, which is it still draws 2 cards if it's in the middle of your hand, as opposed to Spectral Sight. So it, you know, it is more likely to draw 2 cards, even though it never draws 4 and costs 1 more. But in that spot where it was on the far left, it's just kind of strictly inferior Spectral Sight.
Sigil of Flame once again being locked in here for Felkeine, and this will clear the board. There's not really any way Warlock generally buffs minions, unless you had Shadow Council. But this is, I guess, a reasonable tailing turn if Warma just wants to lock in card draw and have something stick on the board afterwards.
Yeah. He would love this turn to be Ogremancer. That's kind of his one route to victory. A lot of the time against Demon Hunter is just be able to jam Ogremancer, but even then the Sigil of Flame would probably make him consider whether he wants to drop it as a 3/4, essentially, because the 7 health is a very, very big deal. But he does play double Ogremancer in his list, which I think is a very, very big deal in the matchup overall, because you can see just how often the Demon Hunter has to just keep ripping spells in order to cycle their way through their deck.
Demons?
These are some of those tough choices that Demon Hunter has when you've got those weird hands. He's kind of got everything and nothing at the same time.
Yep. I like this. Don't think about it too much. Just play the cards that are blocking your skull and just call
Raven's Trap.
Yes. 100%. Tamsin.
Haven't heard of me?
I'm strong.
Will.
I like this option. It's a small thing, but he takes Soul Fragments here over healing, which I think is absolutely correct. I think even if he did not have Sociologist in his hand, it would still be correct, because Sociologist is such a powerful swing turn potential. But obviously, because he has it juiced up, ready to go for next turn, it's very, very clear that he should be putting Soul Fragments in his deck as opposed to healing with the Drain Soul.
Nope. Parents again.
This is basically the spot, though, right? From the first APAC encounter, it's like, well, I have my skull, I'll just glide it away. Like,
Good work. You never know. I mean, to be fair, Il'gynoth's in his hand, and he might not want it in his hand at 4 mana, so
yeah, true.
just glide away. Glide like Spider-Man or whatever they were talking about earlier on in APAC.
I mean, let's not talk about some of the words that came out of Derek's mouth during that cast.
Sociologist is going to come down, and it's definitely on Felkeine here to clean up this board, or he's going to be in trouble. Ugh.
He's a 0-mana talented Arcanist, though. Which means
Where's the
we are...
Should have glided. Oh, is it? What's it like? Glowed?
Hang on. That's 3 damage, 6 damage. 6 damage times 3 is 18, plus an I-beam, plus the weapon. Isn't this just lethal?
I'll take your word for it. I was just thinking of what the other word for glided would be. So yeah.
Yeah, I know you were rambling on about nonsense, but you know this is quite a technical deck, and I was quiet. Attention, and I'm pretty sure it was just lethal. Yeah.
I'm trusting Felkeine here as well. If it's lethal, then he's locking it in, and looks like he's going to get the job done. Wow.
Sorry, you were saying. I'm sure you were making a bad joke somewhere along the line before I had to pay attention to Hearthstone.
It's kind of asking a real question. Like, is it glowed? Is that the glided?
Well, sorry, are you asking me in earnest if the past tense of glide is glowed?
Maybe. Most importantly, though, I think I broke Salt. Felkeine does take the win with his Demon Hunter. To be expected. I can't even look at you. I'm going to minimize my screen. To be expected there, but of course, like, you know, that was the matchup, right? We saw quite rightly he locked in a Demon Hunter, probably just wanted, maybe even mentally, just a win under his belt to then continue in the series, because the other options available here for Felkeine are a little bit more dicey, and it does look like Sottle, he is going to be going for that mage in the next game.
Yeah, it looks like he is. No, I've just about recovered. It looks like he is going to run through the gamut of decks in kind of the order that gives him, you know, the best chance of essentially being in the series. Right? It's irrelevant as Conquest queue order always is, but some players do just like to get their teeth stuck into the series before they play the big important matchup. He does obviously have to win that good matchup with the OTK Demon Hunter, this okay matchup with the Mage, and then he has to win an extremely bad matchup with the Priest at the end, the way he's planned this out.
Yeah, and even this matchup, although of course there's always, well, one, I guess, the Deck of Lunacy plan to just go nuts. There's the burn plan, but also the Warlock does have the capabilities to heal for a significant amount, which makes the burn plan, especially when there's 2 Mask of Cthulhu's, maybe not quite as consistent, because Warlock can also put some big minions on the board, which, you know, severely limits the actual raw face damage Mask of Cthulhu can do.
Yeah, it's definitely changed up a little bit since the nerf, because it's very hard to just kind of explode with the Lunacy on turn 2 and then just end the game before Warlock can really get into the game. Now, because you're playing like Lunacy on 4, by the time you get some of your big power cards down, you know, they might have Twisting Nether or upgraded Cascading Disaster coming into play at that point and actually have answers potentially for the cards that you're coming out with. So it's a very different matchup, and it's a very difficult matchup, I would say, to get there on the pure burn plan because of the amount of healing they can put together with Soul Fragments and Tamsin and Drain Soul and Siphon Soul and Armor from Jiraxxus and all the things that they can put together. Plus, they're so good at keeping things on board to soak up damage from Mask of Cthulhu, if it comes down to that as well. But having said that, you know, I talk primarily about the negatives. There are a lot of positives for the Mage in this matchup as well, and I do think it's a fairly even one overall.
Yeah, well, let's see how it is going to kick off there. Warma, not having the most mind-blowing mulligan. I was going to say I wouldn't be surprised if all this just got thrown away for actual minions, which, hey, yeah, there you go. That's a lot of minions to play there for Warma. And also, for me, I think one thing that stands out about the deck, as a very quick font of power was played there for Felkeine, is that the deck doesn't suffer as much as others from a Apexis Blast, because the deck has removal for that kind of tempo turn, right? So I think that's definitely a positive going into it, though. But Warma, just having all the minions in the world to kick this off with. I think as well, Felkaine's lack of card draw in hand right now is already scaring me.
Well,
Felkeine
shaking his head. This is the other low-key downside, right? Of I mean, it's not even that low-key, but it's kind of the hidden downside of the nerf of Deck of Lunacy, is that you almost never now get to go Lunacy first, then Flow, which is the order that you want to do it in, right? he's already gone flow first because of course he did, because he had that card in hand on turn 2, and then he's not wanting to cast Deck of Lunacy because now he just doesn't, his deck's not that good for Deck of Lunacy anymore in this kind of matchup. Like, playing a Libram of Hope every turn doesn't really get him there. He wants burn and he wants Nagran slams if he's going to do that against his opponent.
And just to, I guess, go over this as a point, this was never because Felkeine doesn't feel Deck of Lunacy is correct for this matchup, right? Like, he doesn't feel like he needs just all the burn cards straight up and not roll the dice with Deck of Lunacy.
It's specifically, I would say it's specifically because he's discounted first.
Right.
That he's, if he just hadn't played Flow on 2 and he top decked Lunacy on 4, I think he'd be playing Lunacy because the potential then to just hit those big board generations into Nagran Slam, and you do tend to pick up the odd bit of burn with, a 1 mana card turning into a Fireball or 2 mana card turning into an Apexis Blast. That kind of stuff just generally happens anyway along the way. I think that's generally worth just for how explosive it can be. But because he's discounted first, the quality of his deck just is not as good at this point. And like I said, just playing 1 Libram of Hope a turn, who cares? Siphon Soul, Cascading Disaster, all those cards I talked about at the start of the game. Warlock can deal with all that kind of stuff. So I think when it's bad Deck of Lunacy deck versus having all your burn, I think he just wants all the burn.
And well, let's see how he continues here. Just going to try and get more of these spell damage minions. And this is always a tough choice I struggle with when it's safe to do so, I guess, is Steward of Scrolls versus the Phoenix. Because obviously the Phoenix is just insanely powerful and you can set things up. But Steward of Scrolls is a spell discover, which is a big deal, right? So I always struggle when I have choices like similar to that power level of which one to actually go for. Hey.
Oh, that was sick. I will confess I was in confused silence there for a second as to what was going on. But that was actually a really, really cute play because so he had the 3/2 to begin with, which is obviously a downside to have in your deck because it shuffles a minion into your deck and then your Apexis Blast doesn't work and yada yada yada. But then he played it on the board and I was like, wow, he's actually going to play it. And then he brain froze it himself, and I was like, okay, this is getting weirder and weirder by the second. And it was only at that moment where it dawned upon me how cool that play was, as he then sacked his Talon to pull out the Solarian Prime straight away. Very nice.
It's good usage, right? And it also, although it's too early, I'll say, him guaranteeing it in hand versus, bottom 2 of his deck or something is a big deal because it's a card that can make such a huge impact, especially against Warlock, when you might need that sort of extra spice to either clear a board or push some more damage.
He's still pleased with himself. I mean, rightly so.
I don't mind, really I'm okay with it.
It's a really cool play, but he is still quite clearly very pleased with himself.
I mean, that's just a victory. You can go home happy now. Fucking.
That's true. Darrett Brown, make a note. Top 5 plays.
Yep.
Oh, you've got a prime in your hand. Get baited by the potion. Come on, you want to.
I'm actually more expecting the video this week from Darrett to be top 5 glides from APAC.
Ah, true. Yeah, good point. Oh, how those players glowed.
At this point, with a lack of card draw, I think Felkeine's plan is to just try and get to Prime and make it do something at this point.
Mm-hmm.
Warma also next turn does have his proc. I'm a tiny bit surprised he didn't just go for Militia.
It was only 1 to begin with, I think.
Yeah, I just mean it procs his Ticketus, right?
Yeah, but I think that's fair.
Like you can faster Ticketus.
Yeah, I think it's fair now just to set up, he just loaded up on Soul Fragments that turn. Now he can play a huge Sociologist. I think it's worth being 1 turn down, right, for just how much better he makes the Sociologist, and he can do the same thing. I think it's pretty reasonable. Yeah,
forces a much more difficult board clear here from Felkeine than just forcing you need, kind of 1 piece of removal to deal with the Militia.
Yeah. And now from Felkeine, having also seen the philosophy on the previous turn, he will know what this means pretty much. That he'll be facing down 2 corrupted Ticketus in hand on the other side.
What it will mean is his Solarian Prime turn was definitely important, as that might be what he needs to beat 2 Ticketus.
I mean, genuinely, like, it's a real thing. Like, not only was it a super cute play, but it's like a real thing in this matchup, right? Whereas if you're going to shuffle a really important card into your deck, you want to draw it as quickly as possible before it gets burned away. Not to mention the fact that he's putting a really powerful card in his deck, but he doesn't want any minion in his deck to begin with. So, like, it's not even best of both worlds. It's best of three entirely different worlds with the play that Felkeine managed to make. The only downside to the play he made is just how insanely low tempo it was in comparison to other things he could do, because he spent his turn blowing up his own minions. But overall, I think it may have been a net positive.
Yeah, I mean, you don't need tempo if you've got Prime, right? Does it for you.
True. Gonna Rune Orb the 5/5 here? Yep, okay.
I'm just going to clean up as much of the board as possible. Ring Toss could help with some recovery options after Prime, or some card draw options even as well, but it does look like, to me, it's very hard here for Warma to not just jam Ticketus.
Right.
Falcon's like, come on, play it.
Yeah. Pram, fine. Mask is huge. Bringwater's huge. Okay, that's 2 out of 5 that were pretty monstrous burns there.
Falcon cracking the old knuckles and just getting ready for fireworks right now.
Oh! Insta-potion! Insta-potion, Raven! It's actually gone and happened.
Yeah, this is not bad at all, right? Especially with Paladin in hand. Like, that's just a good second card to have too.
He got Mana Biscuit second Solarian, Raven. Like, that's the nuts.
By my calculations, you need to chill out.
Again!
He's holding? He's holding. Okay.
I like this because he gets to draw cards before Ticketus burns them all away.
I mean, there's still 5 cards left in his deck, right? Like, it doesn't actually make any practical difference whether he draws them now.
Was it if there's Yasharaj next turn though?
No. He would draw 2 cards next turn as opposed to drawing 2 cards this turn. It would be exactly the same.
Sure. Oh my.
So 7 in play currently, 13 from the Fireball, 15 from the Runed Orb. He does have Solarium, which is just natural spell damage if it lands on the board and survives, even if it doesn't deal additional damage. It's a pretty big deal.
So my question, Sol, what's the order? I would just have already played the Prime and just seen what happened.
Okay.
The Runed Orb could have pushed him over the edge for just lethal, regardless of, you don't need like the Prime to Fireball face, right?
Right.
The Runed Orb plus X could just have been lethal with Fireball.
Yeah, I think I would have certainly looked at minions attack face first, then play the Prime, then see where we are. But Falcon's just going for another Varden here. Just absolute trio of Vardens on the board, just locking down every single turn. Transforms into a 4/4, of course, with the Disciplinarian Gandling.
Again? Is this like twisting Nether then? It has to be, right?
Guess so.
Now that there's no other option, not that there were many options to begin with for Warma, it just has to twist in Nether?
Yeah, the big problem for Warma, though, is if the second secret was Netherwind Portal, right? Because Counterspell and Netherwind don't proc together. Your first spell would get counterspelled, and then that Twisting Nether would have dropped a 4-drop on the board, which could very, very easily be representing lethal. And now he just insta-rips Mask of Cthulhu on an empty board for lethal! Nothing else matters, Raven. 2-mana Fireball in hand is going to end this one. And the cutest of plays that we have seen in European GM for a long time has paid off in spades for Felkeine to square this series up. I'm getting hyped, but there is still the last obstacle for Felkeine to cross, and that is, unfortunately for him, one of the absolute worst matchups in the game here, with Priest going up against Warlock.
And I think that's completely reasonable to say, though, right? We all know how, like, ridiculous Prime can be. You know, we know what the card does by now. But if he had made any other turn, right, any other turn at all and didn't like force the shuffle draw, then one, he may not have had it in time to play anyway, naturally. Two, there were 2 ticketers. There could have been 3. And the thing is, would he have even won that game? Because the Prime itself kept him in it. Never mind anything else, right? Because otherwise the board would have been overtaken. Remember, he Vardened 3 times, which he just wouldn't have also been able to do without the Prime. So that was a really, really big play there. And quite frankly, you know, what we can see now, of course, the game-winning play. Because otherwise, he would have just been overrun by simply the 9/9s as the 2 ticketers, right? Like, he would have just died. It's crazy.
Yeah, and I do think, you know, through the power of the Vardens, they just froze the board over and over again. And actually looking back at it in retrospect, this was a line that I just kind of missed and only see now as Felkeine played it out. Felkeine understood that if he kept using the Vardens to freeze the board, eventually there was going to have to be a Twisting Nether or a Mass Clear coming out from the other side if it wasn't going to be like fully corrupted Cascading Disaster to be a one-sided clear. And if Twisting Nether comes down, he then has that beautiful clear canvas on which to create art with the Solarian Prime, right? Because then any fireball that gets cast is going face. Any ping from Mask of Cthulhu that gets cast is going face. So he's massively increasing his odds of actually dealing damage directly to Warma, which is really all he was interested in there. And again, that is a very weird game. That is a game that I think a lot of people would have lost on multiple different steps. And you love to see that. But again, you'd love to see it be a big climactic moment where Felkeine got all the way back to this comeback, got on 2-2, and then came out of the series with the victory. And we can talk about what an epic comeback it was for weeks and months. Maybe even next year in GM, we'd still be talking about it. Not going to happen because he's playing Priest against Warlock. Yeah, it's probably just not going to matter.
Instead, it's likely that we just end up saying, oh, you know that match? You probably should have just played Priest first. We'll see,
That's
though.
the thing, I mean...
Stranger things have happened, Sol.
We've had this nonsense argument for quite a long time, right, as to whether you queue and get it over with, whether you try and build some momentum, whether momentum's a real thing that's even worth talking about. But I think what we just saw today was the most compelling argument for just playing out your stuff, right? Camera time and the opportunity to create absolute artistry in an individual game that you might win. I think that's a more compelling argument than anything else.
More time equals potential of more cool stuff happening.
Exactly.
That's the equation. So yeah, let's move on. This game that's of course already underway. Felkeine got all the work in the world to do. And why is that, Soto? Like, why is Warlock deemed so strong against Priest?
It's just got the best, like, ultimate win condition, right? And there's stuff you can do as Priest. Like, we've talked a lot about the different late-game packages, and you can play some kind of late-game package as Priest, which might give you a chance of getting there if specifically you don't get those cards burned by Ticketus. But when you're playing, like, a super light, trimmed-down version, as Felkeine is here, his deck tops out at 4. Most of those cards are anti-aggro tools, right? Apart from, you know, a couple of Sethics and maybe stuff that he can stack up with buffs and Apotheosis to try and run through the game. Then he has 1 Ysera, which is going to give him a finite number of resources, right? It's going to give him a 7/6, a 3/5, and then a couple of spells that maybe deal some damage. That doesn't sound like a lot for Warlock to deal with, and they don't even have to deal with all of it because they can burn up to 15 of those cards on some occasions if they get the right draw, right? So, and even if we jump through all of those hoops, that card that you see dead center in Warma's hand, that is going to be the big kicker there, is also just the Jaraxxus is going to be a big problem. The ultimate value card that now doesn't even lower your health down to 15 and put you in range of, like, say, Ysera Nightmare ending the game, right? You don't even have to worry about that. It's just a true infinite value engine.
Completely agree. One thing I will say is if Felkeine's going to win this game, studying dragons may be the way that helps him the most here, because he's already had one with them Onyx Mage Scribe, of course, already on board, and then double Draconic Studies still is a way you can do it, and just drop bomb after bomb after bomb on board and just say, yes, instead of you saying, oh, Warlock's got great removal, it's like, no, you need removal every turn or you're going to just get beat up. So I think Felkeine is on the right path here, but he does have to deal with this Ogremancer because, again, Priest, not a class that wants this minion to stick because it is so spell heavy.
Oh, that Hysteria draw is outrageously clutch here for Warma, because I was almost about to have to broach the conversation of, uh-oh, is it happening, Raven? Because it's double 5-8 on board and no answer in hand from Warma. That is one of the few places where we can see there being enough pressure represented from the Priest to rush this down. Felkeine's face right now, by the way, is because he thinks he's about to get Cascading Disastered, because that's what this play plays directly into. I think Felkeine's absolutely done the right thing by taking a risk in a bad matchup here, but of course Cascading Disaster would be corrupted once by that Ogremancer coming down on the previous turn, meaning it would be a full clear here. Now with the face attack, he is certain that he is getting Cascading Disastered right now, but we'll see what his reaction is to the actual reality. Yep. Okay, not too bad. We take that.
Felkeine's great. You could just you could just judge everything you need to know just from the camera.
Yep.
And now these Draconic Studies going to come into play. I don't know about you, Saul. I know out of our practice sessions, I like Onyxia more than everyone else combined, but I just think it's a good choice in this instance, at least.
All right, I have to tell the story now.
What story?
There was a game where Raven had like 2 cards in hand, and he played Draconic Studies for like Circus Amalgam, Sleepy Dragon, and Malagos, and was like, I don't know which one of these to take. Like, what are you talking about? Take the one that draws 6 cards. What is wrong with you?
Look, I like to consider my options, Saul. There's nothing wrong with that.
I do actually agree with you in this case, though, that Onyxia coming down just as a much bigger threat, and crucially one turn, potentially just coming down earlier and refilling over and over again is a very, very big deal for sure.
Yeah, and the refill, the first time it happened to me, I knew about it, and it still caught me off guard.
Every turn? Every turn.
Yes.
Yeah.
So at the end of your opponent's turn, and if Onyxia is still alive, of course, it will fill the board with little dragons, and they can attack. Yep. on the player's turn, so it's really powerful. If, of course, there isn't spot removal for the A8.
Oh, Raven, what is happening? What is happening? There's just still a 7-6 on the board. Is it happening?
Also, there's Illucia to come into play once Felkeine decides that he's used the relevant cards already.
Yeah, this is a thing that can be done where, if you have pressured the Warlock enough that they haven't just been able to jam Ticketus against you, and you get to 9 mana and you have the read that they have an uncorrupted Ticketus in their hand, you can just Illucia and do that because it denies so much of their potential game plan, but we're living in dream worlds, potentially.
I was going to say, I think what's quite likely is one of those aggro Illucias, right? Like, Felkeine's beating him up. If he could play another dragon this turn, and then next turn, go face Illucia and be like, well, I know you can't play Twisted Nether, or anything like that, right? Because I've got it.
Yeah, the problem he's going to run into is that he'd be handing currently like Wave of Apathy and Shadow Word Death over to his opponent.
Yep.
Like Wave he can dump, Shadow Word Death he kind of can't unless a target is presented on the other side. But it's certainly something that you have to look out for. Priest is not good at being aggressive, so they have to do very unique things sometimes in order to make aggression happen.
Well, Felkeine here kind of setting up for potential removal, knowing that this has to be respected, what he has on board right now. And then he has, a pretty decent and very cheap choice of a dragon to play.
Whew. But Warma can breathe a sigh of relief here for sure, as a School Spirit's double Drain Soul is finally going to get himself out of this fine mess he's got himself into.
There is the old 6 mana Onyxia, though.
There is.
And then just maybe Holy Smite onto the Tamsin, because you definitely don't want to leave Tamsin sitting around on the board.
No, for sure.
Magic is not a toy.
Okay, decides he wants the spell to go off there. Get the spell burst, get even more cards in a combo with the palm reading, just to reduce down some of this hand a little bit.
Renew looks like the only option. Fairly sure you don't want a handful of Devouring Plagues in this matchup. Yeah, just dropping the Wave of Apathy here just to make space in hand. Also, as discussed, just denying that powerful option from his opponent if he does end up going for a Tempo Illucia to end the game.
Looks like a Drax's turn to me, though. Wait, is he going to play Alex? Oh, I'm surprised. I'm surprised.
Big tempo swing though, right? Huge tempo swing.
It is, but
Feels like-
Falcon's not had to do anything this game.
It's true. But he feels like even if Felkeine has all the removal to deal with this, it'll probably take up a large amount of his turn to do so, and then he'll be in a safer spot to just jam Jiraxxus on the following turn than he would have been there into the 4-9, possibly, is the argument.
I guess. I am definitely someone who, at any moment, I'm not dead and can play Jiraxxus. I normally just do. And of course, he had the strongmen, which would have worked with Jiraxxus just as well as Alexstrasza.
Yep.
Just think he could have had one extra 6/6 this game. That's what I'm saying.
Oh my goodness, the value engine this game.
It's like old Dragon Mage with what was it called? Operative, isn't it?
Oh, Draconid Operative? Yeah.
You remember when the game was just about getting 100 of those,
Wait,
basically?
You say Dragon Mage? I'm assuming you meant Dragon Priest.
I
got
definitely
really
meant Dragon
confused by that
Priest.
stuff. Okay. I was like, what? You said Dragon Mage, and I'm like, what on earth is he talking about? What is this, some kind of Kibler deck? Like, what are you talking about?
Probably. But no, I did mean Dragon Priest. My apologies.
Yeah.
Nixia got dispatched pretty easily.
Indeed. Mirror does solve the problem. I think ideally he would have been looking for like buffs for the Blade Master there, so he could tempo swing back this turn. Soul is better than nothing.
He could still go for a renew first,
True. Yeah.
just to see if he gets apotheosis.
Mm-hmm.
Might just want to play rally instead, right?
That's fair. What does he get back now? Because all of those things cost 3, so he probably gets one of those back. Yeah, the Lucky Soul Hoarder and the Rush Minion all cost 3.
Yeah, it's just like, so a dragon, a one maker, and a demon walked into the bar. Definitely a strange collection of minions there for Felkeine. Warma finally gets the Jiraxxus down, and things are going to start rolling pretty fast now because, again, can Felkeine keep up with a 6/6 for almost free every turn?
No!
Thank you. Well, now we know. I guess we may as well finish the game.
I mean, it looked close again in the mid-game because the pressure was there. But as long as the pressure isn't there, no, the answers absolutely are not there for infinite 6/6s every turn.
And this does feel iconic. He might not do it this turn. I'm honestly not sure what the cascading is at. But the twisting Nether into Jiraxxus hero power is like such an iconic play. I love it. Don't you tell me you're not going to press that hero power, Warma.
How shall I destroy you? Summer, not you.
It's like it did
He's
that
actually
one extra
not.
corruption. Yeah, that's what I mean. This is what I thought he was going to do when I said don't. Yeah, this surprises me.
Surprises me too. I think you can definitely be a little bit more greedier than this against Priest, especially against Priest when you have Twisting Nether in your hand as an old crap button if you need it.
Also, as well, Warma should know that Felkeine has a ton of minions, right? He's seen multiple studies. Obviously, there's still one studies left, I think, that's in hand. And he's seen, Raised Dead and everything like that. He saw Raised Dead before the Soul Mirror as well.
Yeah. Yeah, honestly, I would have just liked just playing minions into that turn, just going like Ogremancer Scorpid hero power or something like that.
I guess this unlocks the Yasharaj more, right? Not that he might necessarily want to play it next turn, but he gains a fully corrupted one in the pool, right?
Yes, for sure.
Would mean he wouldn't press the hero power again, though, Sol.
I mean, why have you even transformed into Jiraxxus?
No, you know what? Take that card out your deck. Put the hero back.
Yeah.
He's looking to be drawing Tictus now? Or is there one strongman? Let me check. Oh, I've been kicked out of the thing where I can check. Never mind.
It does appear to be one strongman left, yeah.
Ah, okay.
It looks like he is committed not to playing Scorpid, I guess, for Hysteria concerns. Just he's trying to limit the options that the Priest has for clearing his board, which the options are limited to begin with, so playing around Hysteria is very simple. And if he doesn't want to play a Scorpid ever this game, then I can get on board more with his play from the previous turn. Okay.
Well, there's the top end of his deck.
Soul Mirror again. So only 10 cards now remaining for Felkeine. There's a decent chance he can get through most of this without having any of them burned, but it still remains to be seen whether that actually has an impact on the game or not when he gets to play with his whole deck.
It's really difficult though, isn't it? Because again, the other upside of Ticketus is it's just a massive minion.
Ooh. Monster. Absolute monster top deck.
So here's another question then. Is this actually Yashiraj to activate Ticketus for next turn? Because does Warma really need 2 right now?
Well, worst case scenario, he can just have his Talon die somehow and then play a 7-mana strongman next turn to corrupt his Ticketus. But I can certainly like feel like I'm fine with it. Like this is a reasonable play for sure. Gets to push tempo, yep, cascading, just absolutely load up on the strongman, then he has Ticketus to follow this up, and you do want to go max tempo into this kind of turn. He might hold 1 back, but just going max tempo here is important for the same reason I discussed earlier, right, is that you want to force your opponent to allocate as much mana as they possibly can to answering your board,
right,
so that you're able to just jam Ticketus on the following turn unpressured.
Yeah, I mean, Ticketus hero power against empty board is like, oh, okay, you know, it's going to be insane. Another
Soul Mirror again. This is what I mean, right? Just nowhere near enough pressure to prevent Warma from being able to play Ticketus because he had to commit that Soul Mirror that turn. It's the only reasonable way. Arella down. Sethic down is huge. Scorpid down is potentially huge as well. That's a lot of value generation. I mean, saying that, it's not like Felkaine's hand is short on value generation right now. That infinite chain of Onyx Mage Scribes he's been generating this game has been a huge upside for him, but it's really not a value game anymore. It's a can you survive a 6/6 every turn kind of game, and the answer to that I think is still very much no.
And the problem is, yes, but for not long enough, right? Because the problem is Soul Mirror can't be played with anything relevant for development for Felkeine, and then Warma just presses hero power again, and well, now you're in the same spot without Soul Mirror.
Right. Oh, I'm rooting for him so hard, Raven. Like, it would have been such an insane comeback after that mage game if he'd been able to get over the line with the priest. I really would have loved to have seen it happen, but it's starting to look more and more unlikely.
I must consider.
Can he ever take a Ysera turn here? Ysera bounce the 6/6?
I've been looking at it, yeah.
Because then it
since
sticks
it's been drawn. Yeah. Obviously, the fact that you can't realistically dream the biggest minion is kind of a downside in that position, but it's definitely a way to tempo swing, right, and to try and get something in play. But I do like this more because it kind of achieves the same thing, right? Go on.
You've been able to Ysera, Power Word Fortitude the Ysera, and then dream?
Did he play any spells this turn? He didn't, right?
He played Soul Mirror.
He played the Soul Mirror, yeah. So it cost 5. It cost 3 originally. It would have gone up to... Yeah, I think he could have done
Yeah, he could have, right? Because it would have gone...
Yeah.
There's Dream, Nightmare...
Well, actually, no. He wouldn't have had enough space in hand. So the spells appear in order. They go 0, 1, 2, 3, 4 in your hand. I'm not sure how much hand space he had to begin with and like which of the cards he would have missed out on in that position. Maybe that was the problem.
Yeah, I think you would have missed the minions. Interesting. That was just a thought, that's all.
Well, you get Laughing Sister before Ysera Awakens. So if he was going to miss 2, he would have missed Awakens and the dragon. Like, it's so much value. Like, I genuinely haven't seen, like, this higher value a priest game since the new expansion. You know, since, like, you know, the infinite one-mana spell thing kind of went away that we had in the previous metagame. But there's just no time to play these cards.
But it's just... Yeah, it's just that Felkeine's going to hit fatigue first, clearly. Ysera 1 and 2 are too slow, I think. I mean, I guess this is the turn, right? It has to be.
Yeah.
Ysera, he should be able to Fortitude and Dream.
May pass, but the dream is eternal.
Yeah. Is he just not fortituding? He's not fortituding. Okay.
So wants to wait and see if there's removal first. If it sticks, he can Fortitude. There it is. I actually think at this point, fatigue is just going to kill Falcon, right?
Exactly, yeah. That's what I'm saying. Like, the hand is just way too slow, right? Like, there's so much value, but he just doesn't have the time to get the juice out of it.
Quick, Illucia and play those lucky doos. And then draw a card. It'd be great. He wouldn't go positive, right? Even though they would shuffle in 2 and draw 1 because of the fatigue.
Well, I mean, they shuffle in soul fragments, right? So they just keep drawing anyway.
Sure. Beam again on the 6/6. And guess what? Warma's probably going to press their power this time.
Oh, of course. Why? It's the Ysera OTK. Why haven't I thought about this before? You just play enough Yseras while dreaming your opponent's minions that you just have enough nightmares and power word fortitudes to end the game.
For that, mate, you've got to have a minion stick.
Yeah.
Just play a 6-cost demon now, an Inferno.
Well, those were 2 fine ideas you had on the previous turns, Felkeine. What have you got for us now?
What even spell? Does it have to be like... Yeah, it would have to be like Draconic Studies into Deathwing, and somehow Felkeine doesn't die from fatigue, right?
I mean, he needs to find some way of generating Nazmani Bloodweavers and then transitioning into Miracle Priest. That's literally the only way I can imagine he wins this game.
He's
Okay.
doing it!
Minions stuck.
Yeah, double Nightmare in hand. OTK's slowly not getting there. He can, like, Sethek, Nightmare.
Finally,
If
the score
Felkeine
comes down.
Wins this series, I think we should just give him the 5 points.
I agree. If Felkeine wins this series, I think we should just give him the World Championship, to be fair. Like... Yeah, so shit. Warma now dropping the Scorpid. Again, like, this Scorpid was kind of a double whammy in terms of Hysteria, right? Like, he's never wanted to play it for the whole game because he's had big threats on board and it makes his stuff get Hysteria'd, but also it's a minion that he can use to clear opposing boards with his own Hysterias if it came to it, right? So I think he's been quite smartly holding on to it for as long as he possibly could. I think now he sees it as the time just to drop it.
Oh, inside, what a slap in the face.
Is there a realistic way to generate a Nazmani?
No.
Like, it's worth knowing for this kind of position if there is, but I suppose I can't think of one off the top of my head. Priests generate minions very well.
Nope, it generates spells. So yeah, that is going to be the series. That was what closer than Warma I imagine would have liked in that series, because it didn't look like it should have gone to that extent. And even towards the end, obviously for a few turns, you could see that it wasn't realistically going to happen for Felkeine. But still, that went to late game. He survived the majority of the power, but once more, Jiraxxus, proves his worth, right? Of just saying, well, this is a 6/6 every turn. What deck has a better endgame than that? And as I mentioned, the endgame of Priest is interesting me greatly at the moment, because some players are putting a ton of stuff right at the top, and some players, such as Felkeine, such as Blyze, of course, are running like one late game card. And against these value decks, it's just not enough.
Yeah, I do. I'm kind of on board with that decision, though, because you can put every win condition you want in your deck, you're still unfavored against Warlock. Nothing really changes that. You can maybe gain a couple of % with Cthulhu and some way to turbo draw through your deck and get some kind of Cthulhu strat going. So I think when you bring Priest to a tournament, you are saying this is an anti-aggro deck for me, and I just kind of concede to Warlock, right? And I think that's probably the best way to build the deck, is just